I was busy doing dishes late one night when I happened to glance out my window right above my kitchen sink. I had to adjust my eyes and squint at first because I wasn't exactly sure what I was seeing. Once I was able to make out what it was, the sight before me was truly terrifying and frightening. I thought it was a man at first, except he looked like a dog, had a long snout and pointed ears. They reminded me of a German Shepherd's ears, and I had a hard time understanding what I was looking at. But then, my eyes continued to observe the rest of its body. It had a torso like a man, with human-looking arms and legs. This thing was covered in hair or fur all over its body, and it appeared to be a dark brown or black color. It was one leg, stepping over our old wooden fence with what appeared to be a dead cat in its arm. As soon as it lifts its leg over the fence, it quickly turned its head back toward the direction it was coming from, as if to make sure it wasn't being seen. I got goosebumps, bad. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. As soon as it lifted its leg over the fence, it quickly lifted up the other leg and was gone in a flash. I threw the dishes down and ran to go wake up my wife to let her know what I had seen. She said to me in a groggy state that I shouldn't stay up late anymore and do dishes because clearly I was seeing things. I still don't quite understand what it is that I saw, even though my wife doesn't believe me. I've looked on Google to see if I can find any images close to what I saw, and I guess it's a rougarou. I believe that is French for werewolf, although I'm pretty sure that werewolves are fictional. But I can't deny what I saw that night, so I really don't know what it was. It was so scary and so human-like. The only dog-like thing about it was that it was covered in fur and that it had a large head of a dog. I'm convinced that I saw a Wolfman of some kind. I'm just thankful that it never turned back and looked at me. If it wasn't for the full moon shining at the right place during the right time, and having virtually no clouds, and having not looked up when I did, I would have never ever known it was there. It was maybe only 30 to 40 feet away from the window. I used to live in a neighborhood in eastern Pennsylvania for about 12 and a half years. Pennsylvania is the witchcraft capital of the world, so all sorts of freaky stuff goes on. For the record, this neighborhood was a little bit smaller. We all kind of knew each other. I lived in that neighborhood on and off for 12 years, but we had what we'd like to call the neighborhood creeper. We all kept tabs on what this thing was, but we believe it was some sort of monster. Look, I know that sounds silly coming right off the bat, but let me explain. This creature would steal our cats and dogs, and it tried to break into our houses. Only sometimes, though. It wasn't around all the time, and there never seemed to be a rhyme or reason for it showing up. But it was primarily active during the early morning hours and at nighttime. It would come and go, no matter what season or month. Unfortunately, I got the chance to see this thing nearly face to face through my window. It had a very scary wolf-like face, pointed ears, and very human-like hands, but they were pressed up against the glass, so I couldn't see them as much as I would want to, or not want to. Judging by the size of this animal, it could have very easily just pushed my window through and gotten to me, but it didn't. It was like it was reminding me that I was its prey, and it wanted to keep me in my cage until it was ready to feast. I know deep down that this thing could catch me and put me out of my house and eat me if it wanted to. There is a very old sweet lady that lived just a few houses down from me. God rest her soul. She passed away a few years before I moved out, but she described it as looking like a werewolf. She said it was black and gray in color and had very large teeth. She said it would always steal her cats and eat them. She was one of those elderly ladies that kind of let it go with having cats. I mean, her cats were always having kittens and having more and more kittens. She never really took care of them, and it really got out of hand. I guess you can say she was the crazy old cat lady, but she wasn't a crazy lady, she was actually a very sweet, loving lady. Anyway, Maybe that's one of the reasons why this thing came around. There was free food supply. I'm not exactly sure. Most people in the neighborhood were terrified from what I recall, and nobody tried shooting at it or calling the cops because, come on, what are they going to do? Last I heard when I moved out, there was still activity because I still keep in contact with some of my neighbors. I had developed close relationships with some of them, especially the ones close to me, and to my knowledge, this thing still lurks around the neighborhood from time to time. To answer some of your questions, to my knowledge, it has never broken into anybody's house, although it has attempted. It's never attacked or hurt anybody, other than household pets, but it has scared the pants off many. The neighborhood kind of goes down on an unofficial lockdown at night, and really don't see anybody out after dark. It's strange because you can go a few neighborhoods over, and people are out walking their dogs at night. But in the evening, not in this neighborhood. I'm glad to have been gone, and honestly, I have no desire to ever return. I was up in the Pacific Northwest and hunting during doe season. I had my tree stand all set up, and I got up there early as I could, waiting for deer. Luckily for me, I was on a friend's property, in which he owned about 30 plus acres. I much preferred hunting on private property, so I didn't have to try and compete with a kill. What happened to me this day made me take a hiatus from deer hunting. So I'm sitting there, waiting in the stand, and I hear something big coming at me in the woods. My first instinct was that it was maybe a large buck, just because of the large sounds and how fast it was traveling. I looked off in the distance where the noise was coming from, and just out of the trees came this massive wolf-looking creature on all fours that just seemed to be passing by. It walked off up into this small hill and vanished again in the trees. I was speechless. I didn't know creatures like that existed out here in the woods of Oregon, and decided it was time to hang things up for a while. Not my story, but a friend's information that I am sharing. I grew up and lived in Colorado for a long time before moving out of state. I have several close friends that are Arapahoe, and have a lot of stories about encounters with creatures they dealt with years back. Not they specifically, stories passed down from their tribe. I don't know if there are any other major native tribes other than the Arapahoe that primarily lived in the Colorado region, but it's the only ones I'm aware of. Many probably know that the Rocky Mountains hold a lot of mysteries. Some of the stories that were shared with me was information dating back to the early 19 and 1800s. Fur trappers and tribesmen alike were captured and devoured alive by these werewolf creatures. I can't remember what the Arapahoe called them, but they had a name for these things. Trying not to convolute the situation, these same werewolf-like creatures would wage war with these other beings that we know called Bigfoot. The Arapahoe also had a name for them, but I can't remember that either. These werewolf creatures would storm into the villages at night, steal children and smaller little kids. They were stealing these little children to eat. They would send the tribe warriors out to go hunt these creatures down, and when the tribesmen would find them, or what was left of them, it was just bones, far, far away in the nest of those creatures. Many tribesmen and fur trappers alike died at the hands of these beings. Bow and arrows and muzzleloaders were no match for a 9-foot-tall beast of the night with superhuman strength. Going back to the werewolf creature waging war with Bigfoot-like creatures, it was believed by my friend's tribe that they were waging war over who got to eat and prey upon the tribe. Many of the tribe's fiercest warriors at the time witnessed the battles between these two creatures, and oftentimes would result in either both creatures dying or leaving the battle severely injured. The creatures, not the warriors. My friend told me that his tribe describes these creatures as much taller and larger than some of their greatest warriors, and gray to dark gray in color. The Bigfoot-like beings of the tribe were talked about were also very hostile, and would come to capture and steal their women and children at night as well. It was a dangerous environment, and a constant territorial war between the Arapahoe, Bigfoot, and Dogman. There are different sectors of the Arapahoe tribe, and one particular tribe, or village, moved around in fear that these creatures would keep stalking them. It became a relentless pursuit until the village was successful in killing a small handful of these werewolf creatures, severing their heads and putting them on spears, placing them all outside the village to ward off other dangers. Their claim was that these creatures lived in this large underground den deep in the mountainside that they would drag the captured children, women, and tribesmen to and eat them. From what I was told, this den was never expunged because they couldn't match the firepower of these creatures, only ward them off from their own territory, which means that this den is probably alive and well today, and is still very active from the sounds of all the other Dogman encounters in the state. I'm sure it is one of the many dens. Just the thought of that sends shivers down my spine. There's a couple times that tribesmen had ventured into this same den when there were no other Dogman in it, mainly during the day, and would find tons upon tons of human bones and skulls. I thought you might find these stories interesting. Feel free to share them with your audience if you would like to. One night, I got up from sleep and was leaving my bedroom to go get some water downstairs. I saw something behind the curtains in my living room that looked big and black. I could see the shape, and it resembled a strange werewolf silhouette standing close by the door, when suddenly it turned onto its hands on all fours and ran off towards my neighbor's house in the opposite direction. I was scared out of my mind just seeing this tall thing right outside my house. My curtains are so thin, and the moon cast a perfect silhouette of this thing. I wanted to scream my lungs out. My neighbor is a strange guy who has been a paranormal researcher for years. I have never taken him seriously, but maybe I should. Although I don't think he will ever believe me if I told him a werewolf charged at his house. But there is no denying this creature really exists, and it scared the hell out of me. The next day, while I was walking around the neighborhood, I saw strange shadows lurking around during my night walk. Gave me the creeps, so I came home early. I couldn't help but shake the feeling that these things are real. After I went back home, I kept thinking about it more and more, and finally said to myself, Did I see a werewolf last night? And I went online to research it. There is a whole community of people online who share the same beliefs of having an actual werewolf sighting, which surprised me. A lot of people that claim they saw them, with having near accurate descriptions as to what I saw that night. Now, there are so many places online where people like to talk about their encounters. Vitkundev's forum, website. I know about the North American Dogman Project. Your channel. There's so many. There's just something about watching a Dogman encounter on YouTube now that feels so validating. I feel like I'm not crazy. I know I may be older and getting gray, but I'm not insane. These things are real.